When we think of ancient justice, we tend to picture a quick swing of a sword, or perhaps a cup of poison hemlock. We imagine it was brutal, but fast. Nothing could be further from the truth. In the ancient world, if you committed a serious crime, or simply offended the wrong ruler, death wasn't the goal. Death was just the eventual byproduct. The real goal was the process. Ancient empires didn't have mass media, internet, or television to project their power. They had to use something far more visceral to send a message. They used the human body, and they engineered execution methods that were so horrifying, so meticulously designed to prolong suffering, that they make medieval punishments look almost merciful. Today, we are going to walk through the 3 most terrifying execution methods of the ancient world. We aren't just going to list them. We are going to break down the exact biological and psychological nightmare of what the victim actually experienced, hour by hour. Because once you understand the mechanics of these ancient nightmares, you will realize that the human capacity for cruelty didn't start in the Middle Ages. It was perfected thousands of years earlier, starting with a device so wicked, its own inventor became its first victim. Let's travel to the ancient Greek colony of Akragas, in modern-day Sicily, around 560 BCE. The city is ruled by a tyrant named Phalaris, a man famous for his absolute sadism, and a bronze worker named Perilias decides to build Phalaris a gift. It is a massive, hollow statue of a bull, cast entirely in solid bronze. There is a door on its side, and it is large enough to fit a full-grown human being inside. But it's not just a statue, it's an oven. If you were sentenced to the Brazen Bull, the guards would force you inside the hollow cavity and lock the heavy bronze door behind you. For a moment, it's just dark, cramped, and terrifying. Then, they light a massive bonfire directly underneath the bull's belly. As the fire roars, the bronze begins to heat up. Bronze is an excellent conductor of heat. Within minutes, the temperature inside the hollow cavity spikes to over 400 degrees Fahrenheit. The metal walls surrounding you aren't just hot, they are blistering. If your skin brushes against the inside of the bull, it instantly sears the flesh. Your instinct is to scream. And this is where the true horror of Perilias's invention reveals itself. The creator designed a complex system of acoustic tubes hidden inside the bull's nose. When you scream in agony, the tubes act as a horrifying filter. They distort the sound of human suffering, converting your terrified screams into the deep, bellowing roar of an angry bull. To the crowd watching outside, it was a terrifying theatrical spectacle. The bull appeared to be coming alive, snorting smoke from incense placed in its nostrils and roaring with life. Inside, the reality was unimaginable. As the temperature climbs, the air becomes too hot to breathe. Every gasp sears your lungs. You try to move away from the glowing metal floor, but the entire structure is heating evenly. It's not just burns, it's severe heat stroke and extreme dehydration. The human body simply isn't designed to withstand that kind of thermal trauma. The agony would last as long as the executioner wanted to keep the fire stoked. Legend has it that Phalaris was so disgusted by the cruelty of the device, or perhaps just so amused by it, that he ordered the inventor, Perilias, to test it himself. Perilias was locked inside and the fire was lit. He was pulled out before he died, only to be thrown off a cliff. But the Brazen Bull was just a machine. What happens when an empire uses nature itself as the executioner? If you think the heat of the Brazen Bull is the worst way to go, you haven't studied the ancient Persian Empire. They invented a method of execution reserved only for the absolute worst traitors. It was a process that weaponized time, nature, and biology against the victim. It was called Scaphism, and it is widely considered the most gruesome punishment ever conceived. Here is exactly how it worked. If you were condemned to Scaphism, you would be stripped naked and placed inside a hollowed-out wooden boat or a hollowed-out tree trunk. A second boat or trunk would be placed on top of you, encasing your body. Only your head, hands, and feet were left exposed, protruding from the wooden shell. Then, the executioners would force-feed you massive amounts of milk and honey. We aren't talking about a sweet treat. They would force it down your throat until you were violently sick. Next, they would take more of that honey and smear it all over your exposed face, eyes, hands, and feet. Finally, they would push your wooden prison out into a stagnant sun-baked swamp or a murky pond and leave you there. At first, it's just the agonizing heat of the sun and the cramped claustrophobia of the boats. But the honey on your face is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It attracts insects. Within hours, swarms of flies, wasps, and bees descend upon you, feeding on the honey smeared across your eyes and mouth. You can't swat them away because your arms are pinned. You can't close your mouth because the honey is everywhere. But the insects on your face are just a distraction from the real horror happening inside the boats. Remember the milk and honey you were forced to drink? It has given you severe, uncontrollable diarrhea. Because you are trapped inside the wooden shell, the waste has nowhere to go. It pools inside the boat with you. The smell of the excrement attracts a different kind of insect. Flies begin to lay eggs in the waste, and eventually, in your own skin. The larvae hatch. The historical accounts of this punishment describe the victim literally being eaten alive from the inside out by maggots and vermin that crawl into their bowels. The genius and absolute depravity of Scaphism is that the executioners wouldn't let you die quickly. Every single day, they would row out to your boat and force-feed you more milk and honey, keeping you barely alive, ensuring the process continued. According to the ancient Greek historian Plutarch, one Persian soldier named Mithridates was subjected to Scaphism. He survived for 17 days. 17 days of agonizing heat, insect swarms, and biological decay before his body finally gave out. It is a punishment so vile, it's hard to believe it was real. But the Persians weren't the only ones who perfected the art of a slow death. When we hear the word crucifixion, we immediately think of religion. But long before it was a religious symbol, crucifixion was the ultimate tool of state-sponsored terror used by the Roman Empire. The Romans didn't invent it, but they industrialized it. If you were a slave, a pirate, or a rebel who challenged Rome, you weren't given a quick death. You were given the cross. The process began long before you reached the execution site. First came the scourging. You would be stripped and beaten with a flagrum, a whip embedded with shards of bone and iron. The goal wasn't just to cause pain, it was to tear the skin off your back, exposing the muscle beneath, pushing your body to the very edge of shock. Then you were forced to carry the patibulum, the heavy wooden crossbeam, through the streets to the execution site. Once there, the executioners would drive heavy iron nails, 5 to 7 inches long, through your wrists, not your palms. If they nailed your palms, the weight of your body would tear the flesh right off. Nailing the wrists locked the bone in place. They hoisted you up and attached the crossbeam to the upright post. Then, they drove another nail through your feet. And then, they waited. Crucifixion wasn't a death by blood loss. It was a death by asphyxiation. When your body hangs by its arms, the weight pulls down on your diaphragm, making it impossible to exhale. To take a breath, you have to push up on the nail driven through your shattered feet, scraping your raw, scourged back against the rough wood of the cross. You take a breath, but the pain in your feet and legs becomes so unbearable that you have to let your weight drop again, which starts the suffocation all over again. It is a horrifying, agonizing rhythm. Push up to breathe. Drop down in pain. Suffocate. Push up to breathe. This process could go on for hours, sometimes even days, depending on the victim's stamina. Your muscles would violently cramp. Dehydration would set in. Insects would swarm your wounds, and birds of prey would often attack victims while they were still alive. The Romans did this on main roads. They wanted everyone traveling to the city to see, hear, and smell exactly what happens when you defy the empire. When Spartacus led his slave rebellion and was finally defeated, the Romans didn't just execute the survivors. They crucified 6,000 men along the Appian Way, a 130-mile stretch of road lined entirely with crosses. We look back at these empires, the Greeks, the Persians, the Romans, and we marvel at their architecture, their philosophy, and their art. but their societies were built on a foundation of absolute, terrifying brutality. So the next time you complain about a parking ticket or a modern fine, remember the Brazen Bull. Remember the boats. Because in the ancient world, justice didn't just want you dead. It wanted to make sure you felt every single second of it.